feel reggae. White men feel reggae. White men feel reggae. White men feel reggae. White men feel reggae.
I had to go in because of the I don't know what happened the other day, why I had to stop recording, but I'm back on the kitchen steps. The sun is out, but not as quite as warm as the other day. Not to worry. When we left off, we were in the little outpost of Gatima Malilu, and I had taken myself to the police station. My motorbike had a flat wheel again, flat tyre. But before we resolve that issue, I need to say that when we were at the Allen Dean in Hillbrow, Tom and I did go back to Brakpan a few times. I don't have a lot of memories about that interactions, although I do know that we went down to Banana Beach. So we caught up with Rusty, Jenny, and Brian Gould had a girlfriend, Colleen, at the time. Now I was filled with this bluster and overinflated Aussie patriotism, but really just a beer-swilling bogan. And so as a group we did go down to Banana Beach down near Durban one time, and I don't know where we slept. I think we had tents or something. It was really not much. Wasn't very happy with my behaviour as far as Jenny went, or Brian, to be honest. But as I said, you know, I was a different person then. I was a very immature young person. So yeah, I did go back to Brakpan a few times. I don't really remember whether I went to Mum's grave or anything while I was there on those occasions. The other thing I wanted to remember was Dad made a visit to Swakopmund in southwest Africa. It was harder for him to fly to see me in Swakopmund than if he was flying from Zimbabwe across to Australia. I think he had to change planes a few times. But he did make it across for maybe a week, and I organised a hotel for him to stay in, run by an old German fellow that gave Dad bratwurst and beer for breakfast at the bar. Dad kind of liked that. Would have liked to have taken Dad out to that hotel that, you know, was run by the old Germans with the portraits of the Kaiser and, you know, the old beer steins with the bells on and all that, and all the German military paraphernalia around the fort. It looked like something out of the Foreign Legion, but that would have meant putting Dad on the back of the motorbike, and I don't think I was quite that confident, and so we didn't get to do that. So we didn't do much, but we wandered around a bit, and Dad got to see the ocean again and those sorts of things. So Gatima Malilu. So that night I chained up my bike outside the police station. The black policeman on duty, a sergeant or something, a bit of persuading, he said I could stay in the it's getting warm now. I might take this top off. Just hold on a second. Oh, that's better. So yeah, I could stay in a cell for the night. I don't think they locked me in, but I had a bunk and all that. But I wasn't a couple of hours. I might have had a nap. So at about 6 o'clock, this sergeant, the police sergeant, they were all in fatigues, camos. He came and he said, "Oh, do you want to come with us? We're going to do our rounds," or something like that. He didn't say it in that manner, but That's how I remember. So I said sure. So we hopped in this police car, and there was another guy came with us, another policeman. So the first stop was we went across to this beer hall where there were all these Africans drinking, and it was real rough. They had like a bit of wire that was strung along the length of this beer hall, and they'd swing this the bottle opener along there. You'd yell down when you want your bottle opener, and some guy'd sling it down there. You know, all the beer was served in bottles. And we hung in there for a while. There was a lot of singing and dancing, and, you know, everybody wanted to say hello to me and make me, you know who I was and where I was from. So then we went back to these policemen's house, and their wives had made food. We had more beer. We sat around there chatting, and, you know, the neighbours came over to meet me and all that sort of stuff. And then we met up with some army guys, and they had one of these, like a personnel carrier. It had deflective plates underneath it, so it could go over landmines and that sort of thing, but it had a machine gun turret, and I was able to sit in this armoured personnel carrier, and they let me get up in the turret, and they started spinning the cannon around, you know. It was brilliant. We were crashing through the bush, and they were all drunk and laughing, and so that was a brilliant time. And but in the morning, the white officer came on, the captain or whatever he was, and he saw me, and he was yelling at the African sergeant, and you know, this isn't a hotel, get rid of him. So he came and told me that I had to vacate the cell, but not before I saw something which was kind of funny. So one of the police cars had a flat tyre, and the sergeant went around, and he had his keys for all the cells. There were other Africans in the lockup, and he unlocks them all. So about 20 of these Africans came out, prisoners in just plain khaki, barefoot, and they ended up lifting the rear end of the car and changing the tyre. They were a human jack. You would have thought they'd do a runner, but I suppose there was no use. You know, everybody probably knew everybody. So anyway, I managed to get a lift from Katima Malilu in a truck that was carrying goods, transporting goods, and at the top of the Caprivi Strip is like a ferry service where all these African countries meet together. You got Angola, sort of over there. You've got Zambia, which is there, and you've got Zimbabwe, which is over there, and all under here is Southwest Africa or Namibia. So they put my motorbike in the back of a truck, and the truck got the ferry, and we were in Zimbabwe. And then it was about an hour to get to Victoria Falls, and they unloaded the bike for me. I negotiated a price for the truck, and then we dropped the bike off at a mechanic, but the mechanic said, look, we're going to have to order the inner tube from Bulawayo, and that might take a week or so, so we'll give you a ring. So I gave them Dad's number at the bakery, and I got the bus down from Victoria Falls. They called it the Shoeshine service, which was the name of the bus, was the Shoeshine. Don't know why. Packed with Africans and chickens and babies wrapped on the women's backs in blankets, and, you know, goats on the roof, and no windows. The guy that was like the conductor would climb in and out of the windows on the bus to collect the money and give the tickets and all that. Packed, and we went off these dust roads through villages where, you know, every now and then we'd make our way back to the main tarred road, and then we'd be off to another village, dropping people off, picking people up. Till I eventually got to Wankie and saw Dad, you know. So Tom, I think he was heading down to Cape Town, and he ended up working on the yachts. Got a yacht from Cape Town across to Brazil. He ended up working in the West Indies on an American tourist, I don't know, tourist ships or something, you know, yachts for wealthy people. So he did okay. So I was stuck in Wankie, but I And you know, I was still heartbroken over the girl back in Australia, even though I hadn't wanted her when I was there. The fact that she was now dating other people made me want her again, you know, the usual insanity that immature idiots like me at that time had. So I was desperately lonely, but I loved being with Dad, as I said. So what would happen was Priscilla, that was the woman that Dad, that was his girlfriend, I suppose, although he lived with Priscilla longer than he did with my mum. But she was a very tiny little woman. She was a Matabele, tiny little woman, very thin. You know, I didn't realise it at the time, but yeah, she was an alcoholic. She drank herself to death sort of by the age of 30. But she'd be inviting friends and family up all the time. You know, Africans are very family oriented, so Dad had come home from work and there's another couple of people sitting in the lounge, or a couple more women sitting out the back with Priscilla, sitting around drinking beer, singing, clapping hands, chatting. And Dad would say, "Who's this?" And Priscilla would say, "This is my cousin," or "This is my, you know, my sister," or huge families. So one of these family members that arrived was a woman called Amina, and she was Priscilla's sort of half-sister, I suppose. There seemed to be about 8 or 10 of these women that called themselves sisters. They all had different fathers, but they were all from Mary, I think, who was Priscilla's mother. And actually when Dad met Priscilla, there was a tussle between the mother and Priscilla about who was going to take Dad home. You know, they were both pushing their hands away from each other as they were trying to run their hands up Dad's leg. 2 women were fighting over Dad. But anyway, so I really liked Priscilla at the time, but her sister arrived, Amina, and Amina didn't drink, she didn't smoke. Very dark, you know, she was a very dark-skinned African woman. Girl, I wonder what she was. She was maybe a year or 2 older than me, so she was maybe 24. She already had a couple of kids. So anyway, I noticed her, and I was, you know, as I said, I was pretty lonely, and I had the motorbike. And Dad would get up at 5 in the morning and he'd go off to the bakery to start work. He finished about midday. I'd walk up to the bakery at midday, meet him, and we'd go and have some beers at the #1 club, and they had these fantastic samosas, and they were some of the best times ever, sitting having a beer with Dad after his work. He didn't normally do that, he just put it on because I was there. But anyway, you know, I must have I think I asked Priscilla, you know, "Is your sister available?" So I think I was very polite and very proper, and she said, yeah, no, she's interested," or something like that. So Dad went to work one morning, like at 5 a.m. Priscilla had this funny, distorted idea that Dad would yell at her if I was to start sleeping with her sister. So Dad, of course, didn't care at all about things like that. So anyway, Priscilla came to my room. It was like 5 in the morning. She goes, "Psst, hey, go to her. So I get out of my room, I go, and Amina was in another room on a mattress on the floor, and that's how we started our thing, you know. And it was fantastic. Like, she was a really, really great company, good woman, you know. And so I put her on the back of the motorbike, and sometimes at the #1 club they'd have movies or a disco. And we went bushwalking, me and Amina, one time around the game park. And yeah, as I said, and she loved reading. She used to read the library books that I'd take out. I mean, she had no formal education, but she could read really well. And yeah, so I filled in, I don't know how long I was with Dad, for a month or 2 months. I filled it in with Amina till I figured it was time to go. They'd already rung and told me to come pick up the motorbike, so, you know, it had the replacement tyre. So I rode the bike down to Bulawayo, and then I rode across the border into Botswana, because I couldn't sell the bike in Zimbabwe because the currency was worth nothing. But the Botswanian currency, that's the word, Botswanan, was, you know, equivalent to a rand back then. So I rode into Botswana, went through a place called Francistown, and I stopped at, there was like an outdoor pub there with a veranda and a, you know, on stilts, like an old Queenslander. And just like Dad had described for him in Bulawayo, I was sat there on this porch when these African women all started milling around me, wanting to know who I was, where I was from, and they were pushing each other and shoving, trying to get close to me. So I saw a girl that was standing back a bit. She was a bit shy. Her name was Annie. So I got talking to her, and I gave her some money to get her some drinks, and, you know, I bought all the girls a drink. And anyway, Annie said, would you like to stay at my place? So got her on the back of the bike, and we rode back to this little compound, you know, and it was night time by then. She says, I'll bring the bike inside. I don't think it's safe outside. I actually rode the bike into her house, and there were people sleeping on the floor, you know. I had to be careful not to ride over people. Anyway, turned it off. It was just a brick square house, no windows. There were bars on the windows, but no glass. No plaster on the walls, no ceiling plaster, just corrugated iron on wooden beams and concrete blocks for a house. And the garden was it was quite tropical. They had pawpaws and bananas growing, and of course mangoes everywhere. But the garden was kind of like real hard clay, red clay. And they, you know, no running water, no electricity, nothing like that. They were on candles and battery power, you know. So I stayed with Annie for about a week. She was a lovely woman. And I'd, you know, give her some money, and she'd go and get some food for all of us. Of course, she also had a couple of kids, and she had family staying with her. So, you know, the girls would go and get the meat and the food. And I'd you know, get on the bike and go and get a slab of beer, and I'd sit with the boys and drink the beer, and you know, it was all done on fire. I've got a picture of Annie where she's cleaning the dishes after one of our meals. But they were fantastic times, sitting around in a circle with these Africans, listening to reggae, drinking the beer. And eventually I had to leave Annie, so I got on the bike, and she came with me to the outskirts of town. And I noticed at one stage on my backpack, she was fossicking around in the backpack, and I said, what are you doing there? And she said, I'm just helping you pack, or something like that. And so I went to the outskirts of town, and she wandered off. I never saw her again. But after about an hour of riding, I stopped. It was a really hot day. I was on my way down to Gaborone, the capital, and I went through my backpack to find something, and sure enough, Annie had hidden a cold can of Coke in my backpack, which I've never forgotten. Really sweet. So I get to the capital, and I just pitch myself in the mall with a for sale sign with my motorbike. And I wasn't there very long when these two African men come up in suits, and they asked me what I'm doing. I said, I'm selling the motorbike, you know, when I go back to Australia. So they flash these badges at me, and they say, come with us. And one of them pushes a bike, and the other one, I wouldn't say he handcuffed me, but he made it known that I was to come with him. And they took me to the council chambers, and they called some sort of extraordinary meeting of councillors. These Africans came out from these offices. They sat at this huge table. I was at one end on my own, and there was about a dozen of them up the other end. The mayor, the minister for bylaws or something, all very formal, you know, wearing suits and all that. And they read me the charges of having attempted to sell goods in the mall without a license, and you know, the consequences were a fine and possibly, you know, 30 days jail or something. So I realised that the Africans, they love a good laugh, and I thought the only way I can do this is to ham it up for them. So I started making the motion of having my hands handcuffed and of being in jail, and you know, and please sir, I beg for mercy. You know, so Cutter, they were calling me. Objection, my lad, I would say. Objection, my lad. So anyway, yeah, they saw the humour in it, and really all they wanted me was for me to pay a fine. So I paid the fine, I got the licence, went back, and within about half an hour this soldier from the Botswanian army came by in his camouflage and said, can you follow me back to my place, I'll buy it. So I rode the bike, followed him in his car, went back to his house. He went into his bedroom and he came out with his envelope full of cash, and he bought the bike on the spot. And with that I was able to buy the ticket to come back to Australia. I think I probably saw Brian again in Brakpan before I flew out of Jan Smuts. Don't really remember. And I arrived back in Australia. I'd been gone about a year or so. I was, you know, didn't see Tom for about another 6 months or a year. He was, as I said, sailing around the Caribbean, and then he went off to America and did stuff there. So I wasn't to see him for quite a while, and I had to settle myself back into Australia, and I got a job fairly quickly. But I was restless again, you know. I hadn't really done what I'd wanted to do in Africa. But I got the idea with the motorbike. I mean, the trip from Swakopmund up to Victoria Falls was fantastic, apart from the flat tyres all the time. So I got that had planted an idea. Maybe I could ride a bike through Africa. I certainly had liked seeing other African countries. I went into Angola briefly, Zambia briefly, and I started thinking I wouldn't like seeing some more African countries. So I found myself back in Australia contracting, doing IT again, saving my money until I was thinking about going again. So I think that's a good bit of storytelling for you about my time in Africa on my return in '82. As for the girl that I'd been writing all those long sob stories for and crying my eyes out and, you know, wanting back and missing on all that, fortunately she'd moved on and she was doing better things with her life, and I eventually got over her. But we're still friends today, I think. I've let her know recently. I apologised for my behaviour back then. And so yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that. Clouds are coming over now. It's cooling down a little bit. So we'll talk to you on the next episode. Well, I've got 4 Boer War monuments for you. I've got another 2 in mind that are going to do a road trip next week, do another 2, so that's 6 more monuments, and that rate, it's probably almost going to take us to me going across to South Africa. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye.